All right, the hour is 9, so I think we shall begin. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We've also been asked this morning if we might, and we will, take a moment of silence in memory of Marissa Kennedy. Her funeral is today in New York, and she's back with her family. So I'll ask for a moment of silence. Thank you. We'll go through the usual agenda. Emergency exits are clearly marked at the rear of the hall and here, but here is downstairs and through, and I hope we won't need it. So, the bathroom, for anyone that isn't familiar, is on the first floor back in that corner of the building. As usual, we have some people who are willing to serve our area in our state in the various legislative positions, and we will accord them each a minute or so to introduce themselves or their candidate, and just so that you have a face to put with a name when you see it on the ballot. The first one is Charles Plourde, and he's going to speak for Jane Giles.
Good morning, I'm Charlie Plourde, Searsport resident. Jane Crosby Giles is a Republican candidate for the Maine State Senate, and she cannot be here today, but has asked me to deliver a message. Dear Searsport town residents, hello. I'm sorry that I cannot be with you today for your town meeting. I thank Charlie Plourde, longtime Searsport resident, for speaking on my behalf. Charlie has information about my campaign, which I hope you will take with you. Up in the back table, there's some handouts and some grocery bags you can help yourselves to. I'm very excited to be running for the Waldo County Senate seat currently held by Senate President Mike Thibodeau. Mike and I serve together in the Maine House of Representatives. Mike is running for governor, so it is an honor for me to be running for his Senate seat. People often ask me how I got into politics. Before serving in the Maine legislature, I was a banker in Waldo County for many years. Each year there was a Maine Bankers Day at the State House. I attended and was assigned to shadowing Senator Carol Weston from Montville for the day. Carol held the Waldo County Senate seat before Senator Thibodeau. After the third or fourth year, Carol said to me, "Jane, you seem to enjoy the legislature, why don't you run?" That was the start of the Jane for Maine campaign. I ran for and won the House seat representing Belfast, Belmont, and Northport. This year, I am pleased to take the Jane for Maine campaign county-wide. I'm currently on a 16-week Jane's listening tour. I'm visiting businesses, farmers, families, schools, and nonprofits to see what the real needs are of people in Waldo County. If any of you would like me to speak with your group, business, or meet with you individually, please let me know. I will gladly make a visit with you soon. Thank you again. I hope you have a great town meeting, and I look forward to seeing you on the campaign trail. Sincerely, Jane Crosby Giles, candidate for the Maine Senate and former representative to the Maine House. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Aaron?
Well, good morning. It's so nice to see all of you. My name is Representative Erin Herbig, and for the last 8 years, I've represented Belfast, Northport, and Waldo in the state legislature. 2 years ago, I was elected by my colleagues as the majority leader in the House, which was a big honor. I come from 5 generations of poultry farmers in Belfast. All of my grandparents, my parents, and my son, my 2-year-old son, is with me here today. Like many of you, I live here because of my family. But I've noticed I first ran for office because I saw too many young people leaving this state, particularly in rural Maine. I was one of those kids that left, but I came back because I wanted to be near my family. What I've worked on since I have been in the legislature is creating laws and policies that help retain our young people and bring back some of the families that we've lost. I work on job creation to make sure we're getting high-speed internet access everywhere, to make sure that we're lowering property taxes so people can afford to live here, look at childcare costs. This is just the basic equation for a family that isn't working for young families in Maine anymore. And that's what I'm committed to starting, because I want my 2-year-old to stay here in Maine, because we have the same opportunities that are better opportunities than other states. So I was going to say, I'm right now, I started a Waldo County Works business tour last fall. I visited over 75 businesses across Waldo County, visited Wayne at Hamilton Marine. We had a good day. And from that, I am working on 4 different laws that came out of that. I'm trying to get a community college center in Waldo County for plumbers, electricians, composites, and more of the trade, nursing. We already have huge shortages in these jobs. And again, I want us all to thrive together. I want Waldo County to live up to the potential we all know that it has, and I want my son to be able to stay here, like I know many of you would want as well. So I'm excited to be running for Waldo County Senate seat. Please get in touch with me. I'm sure I'll be stopping by your door as I go door to door this summer. I appreciate being allowed to speak, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Mr. Grenier.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Joe Grenier from Stockton Springs. I'm a Democrat.
Get a little closer to the mic.
Good morning. My name is Joe Grenier from Stockton Springs. I'm a Democrat running for State Senate, District 11, all of Waldo County. I ran 10 years ago. I'm here to speak for those left behind. The problems we have today are the same as 10 years ago, or worse. It's about representing all of Waldo County, not a photo op. My campaign slogan is, working together, we can make a difference. Here are some of my concerns. Ending domestic violence and child abuse, health care for all, promoting Maine core values, and those are respect, honesty, compassion, fairness, responsibility, and courage. Children first. No guns in our schools and churches. Protect children, the elderly, and veterans. Promote small businesses for handicap accessibility for disabled and the elderly. I'm running as a clean election candidate, and I need a minimum of $175 $5 donations to qualify for clean elections. I'm asking you for support today. Thank you for allowing me to speak today, and have a nice day at the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grenier. Okay, the next item on our agenda this morning is to announce the election results. The election was held on Tuesday over at the fire station. For the Board of Selectmen, Thomas Hodgkin received 77 ballots, Arthur Coach Jr. 52 ballots, Doug Norman 157, and Linda Payson 118. And for the Board of RSU 20, Anthony Bagley received 196 votes. The 9 people who were elected to Budget Advisory Committee, I'm not going to bother to read the votes because there were 9 people and we need 9 people, so everybody was elected. Dorothy Alling, Brian Callahan, Ashley Curtis, Celine Kelly, George Kerper, Mike Nami, Keith Otis, Robert Jeff Pearson, and Norris Staples, and there was one write-in for Linda Payson, but she can't be in 2 places at once. Okay, the Searsport Historical Society is with us again today for their annual fundraiser, and they have all kinds of goodies and drinks and things up there. And then the chowder will be coming at about 11:30. We have a short agenda this year, and there's a good chance we may be pretty near finished by then. So they are providing bags, and so that people can take the chowder and go, along their way, take it home, eat it then, eat it later, or whatever. So, but you're perfectly welcome to stay here and eat, obviously, if you'd like to. So the rules for today's meeting. First, hang on to your pencils. Thank you. We use the main moderator's manual as a guide for town meetings. It is varies somewhat from Robert's Rules of Orders, but is designed to simplify municipal proceedings, and it has worked for us pretty well. At all times, I expect courtesy to the moderator, to the selectmen, and to those who choose to address any of the items as they come along. I will attempt to recognize people by name if possible, and expect that you will keep good decorum and that I won't have to declare anybody out of order and have you removed. I know, but it's happened here. Not by me. Any non-resident may request to speak. A vote has to be taken by the residents of the town giving them permission, and there must be an affirmative vote of 2/3 of the majority present to allow someone from out of town to speak. Property ownership does not convey voting privileges. My daughter will attest to that. We finally got her to move to Searsport so she could come. You have to be a registered voter in the town of Searsport to vote here. We'll take up the articles in the order in which they are printed. The warrant is an official document that has been posted, and citizens have a right to expect that it will be followed in the order that was posted. I'll read each article in the warrant. I'll recognize a motion and a second before any discussion takes place. So we have to have a motion to get it on the floor. All motions will have to be in the affirmative. That is a motion to take some clear action. I will not accept a motion to pass over an article. A motion may be made to take no action. If a dollar amount is included in the article, that amount cannot be raised. A lower amount can be proposed. If an article says to see what sum, as in all the out-of-house accounts, then the practice has been the amount, up to the amount requested. If a source of revenue is included in the article, that source cannot be changed. Each article is accompanied by a recommendation by both the Selectmen and the Budget Advisory Committee. And you will notice that from time to time there are different recommendations. If an amendment is offered, that amendment will be discussed and voted on first. I will not accept amendments on amendments. If an amendment is voted, then we vote on the article again. We have to vote again after, as the article is amended. An affirmative vote means that the article is approved as amended. If that vote should fail, then we will return to the original article and start over. Motions for the type of vote, that is by show of cards or by a written ballot, is not debatable or amendable. Such a motion takes precedence over all other motions on the floor. A motion to move the question must be voted on without debate. If by a 2/3 vote the motion carries, then the original motion must be voted on without further debate. I would ask everyone, if they wish to speak more than just to move the question, that they use the microphone, and if several people wish to address the same article, then just form a line on the left and we'll go from there. On all articles, in the event that a definite vote is not clear to me by showing your yellow cards, I will ask the ballot clerks to actually do a count. We have several ordinance changes today. They've been well publicized. There are copies up in back if anyone has not seen them. Questions will be answered by the town manager or by selectmen or department heads, wherever that is appropriate. If a secret ballot is used, each person must show their voter registration card to the ballot clerk, receive a ballot, and cast the ballot. And again, if a written ballot is used, and standing in line would be difficult for anyone, the warden can come to where you're seated and bring you a ballot, so you won't have to go and stand in line. If we have a challenged ballot, if we have a problem and a vote has been challenged, we will need to vote again on that article, but that rarely happens. We get along pretty well. So, having said all that, we will proceed with the warrant. Article 1 was to choose a moderator, and Beverly was duly elected, and then appointed me deputy moderator to carry on for today. Article 2 has been completed. I read you the results of those. Article 3, to see what sum the town shall vote to raise and appropriate from 2018 taxes and/or appropriate from general revenues, state or federal grants or subsidies, fund balances, and/or excise taxes for the following municipal accounts for the fiscal year 2018. And the first one is the selectmen's account. The request is for $8,324, and that is to be raised by taxes. Could I have a motion? And seconded? Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. Those in favor then of raising by taxes $8,324 for the selectmen, please indicate. Thank you. Those opposed? All right, the motion carries. The town manager's account. The request for the 2018 budget is for $83,656, and that amount to be raised by taxes. Both the selectmen and the budget advisory recommend that. Could I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. Those in favor then of raising through taxation $83,656 for the town manager account, please indicate. Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The administration account. The request appropriation is $251,541, with $167,541 to be raised by taxes, $44,000 from revenue, and $40,000 from excise tax. Could I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. Those in favor of appropriating $251,541 with $167,541 raised by taxes, $44,000 from revenues, $40,000 from the excise tax. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next is the assessors account. The appropriation request is for $74,434, with that whole amount being raised by taxes. And both the selectmen and BAC recommend that amount. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. The assessors account appropriation request is for $74,434 to be raised by taxes. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Thank you. The next account is the tax anticipation note interest. The request is for $8,000, with that amount to be raised by taxes, and the selectmen and budget advisory both recommend that amount. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, I'll move the question. Tax anticipation note interest, $8,000 to be raised by taxes. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. The next item is the Selectmen's Contingency Account. The request is for $30,000, with that whole amount being raised by taxation, with the Selectmen and the Budget Advisory voting in favor of that. Can I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? You're making this way too easy. All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Selectmen's Contingency Account, the request is for $30,000 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? All right, the motion carries. I just realized I forgot Jack. We'll take a break and you make your presentation.
For a great number of years now, Debbie here has served the board as its secretary and taken our notes of meetings. And this past year, she stepped down from that. So Deb, here's a little something for the board. Thank you for your service to the town.
Okay, we'll go on. The next account is insurance legal. The request is for $106,000, with that whole amount being raised by taxation, and the Selectmen and the Budget Advisory Committee both favored that amount. Can I have a motion? Thank you. And a second. All right, thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the insurance legal section is for $106,000 to be raised by taxes. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next item is the town office line, and the request is for $15,150, and that full amount to be raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second? All right, thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The town office line, the request is for $15,150 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you, and those opposed? All right, the motion carries. The next line is the police department. The request is for $277,784, with $276,284 to be raised by taxation and $1,500 from revenues. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The police department budget request is for $277,784, with $276,284 to be raised by taxation and $1,500 to be raised through revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. The next line is the animal control officer. The requested amount is $5,700, with $2,700 being raised by taxation and $3,000 coming from revenues. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. The animal control account, the request is for $5,700, with $2,700 from taxation and $3,000 from revenues. Those in favor of that item? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next is the Shellfish Warden account. The request is for $3,450, with all of that coming from revenues. Could I have a motion? And a second. Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Shellfish Warden account is, the request is for $3,450, with that entire amount coming from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Steve, would you like to just take a minute and a half to talk about what the Shellfish Committee is doing? Because it was very interesting to those of us on the Budget Advisory Committee to find out just what is this about. And I think it's important to a coastal town.
Chet. The Searsport Shellfish Committee has been together for almost 15 years, led by Bob Ramsdell. You've probably seen him down on the clam flats near the causeway, because he goes down almost every day of the year. He's made thousands of trips down there, and our committee dedicates a person to go down every day during low tide, year-round, to check on the flats. When we started, we were able to give out about 26 recreational licenses. Now we're able to do over 100. What the committee does is inventory the health of the flats, what clams we have left, and we reseed where we test and think that the clams will have the most success in growing back. We usually do 8 to 30,000 little baby clams in the springtime, and that's raised with monies we collect with licenses. We started a program with the state. It's a 3-day permit program where the town gets $15, and we introduce people to clamming. We also give lessons on Sunday to new clammers so they don't break too many clams. When we started, we had less than a mile of flats open. Now we have 5.5 miles of flats open for recreational diggers only. We don't have the inventory to have any professional diggers. We want to protect this as a recreational resource for people that live locally. So come down anytime. We're looking for a couple volunteers. The average age of our committee members is close to 80. I'm the youngest, and it's hard work. And one of us, but it's really nice what we're doing. We've noticed the last few years that the mussels have disappeared, so we need some help in researching what's going on there. All right? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. The next item on our agenda is the ambulance department. The request is for $225,119, with $100,119 coming from taxation and $125,000 coming from revenues. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request is for $225,119, with $100,119 coming from taxation and $125,000 from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The next item is the fire department. The request is for $81,980, with that whole amount being, with $581,780 coming from taxation and $200 from revenues, and the Selectmen and Budget Advisory both recommend that amount. Could I have a motion and a second? Thank you. Questions, comments? Nobody wants a burning permit today? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request is for $81,980, with $81,780 coming from taxation and $200 from revenue. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next item is the Public Safety Building. The request is for $23,690, with that whole amount coming from taxation, being raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. The requested amount is for $23,690 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is emergency management. The request is for $13,539, with $9,539 being raised by taxation and $4,000 from revenues. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? You guys won't go to sleep, will you? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the Emergency Management Department is for $13,539, with $9,539 being raised by taxes and $4,000 by revenue, from revenue. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is streetlights. The request is for $28,000, with that whole amount being raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The appropriation request is for $28,000, with that whole amount being raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. The next line is the fire protection hydrants. The request is for $213,081, with that whole amount being raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I will move the question. The request for the fire protection hydrants is for $213,081 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the Public Works Highway Department. The request is for $453,455, with $153,455 to come from taxation and $300,000 from the excise tax account. Do I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Dolores. I'll let James handle the technicalities.
That's the whole package. That's their pay, their benefits, the winter sand, the summer maintenance, everything's included in that, vehicle repairs, anything to do with public safety. And or highway, sorry. I think of it as safety. But it's also, if you'll note, excise tax is paying the lion's share of that. And you know, a lot of communities use their excise tax in ways other than going towards the roads. They're not obligated, but we feel we need to keep pretty true to the fact that if you're paying that excise tax on your vehicle, that we're going to put it into your roads to make it safer.
So part of this money is on the roads?
Yeah, there's a portion of this money that does maintenance to roads. We also have a reserve account for rebuilding roads. But the routine maintenance, buying culverts and doing ditching, that kind of stuff generally comes out of this account.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Public Works Highway Department request is for $453,455, with $153,455 being raised by taxes and $300,000 from the excise income. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next account is the Harbor Master account. The request is for $19,100, with $13,100 coming from taxation, $3,000 coming from revenue, and $3,000 from excise tax. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Harbor Master account, the request is for $19,100, with $13,100 being raised by taxation, $3,000 from revenues, and $3,000 from excise tax. Those in favor of that motion? Those opposed? The motion carries. The transfer station account, the request is for $104,040, with $24,040 coming from being raised by taxation and $80,000 from revenues. Could I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. The transfer station account, the request is for $104,040, with $24,040 being raised by taxation and $80,000 coming from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The last item on that page is the physical plant. The request is for $19,350, all of that raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Wigan. All right. Question is, what is the physical plant?
I'm going to borrow this mic. It's a little better to see everybody. Physical plant is our what we use to take care of our buildings and grounds. Primarily, what we've done over the years is we've taken the wages out of that, and they're now accounted for in the various areas where people are doing, like cleaning the library. The person that does that's being paid out of the library. Mowing the cemeteries, the wages for that is taken out of the highway department. But what's left are the supplies and equipment and fuel for doing those jobs, and that's what we use the physical plant amount for. And last year, we actually contracted to do some floor cleaning, and that money comes out of the physical plant as well.
Thank you, James. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Diane.
Sure, I need this clarification. So you're saying that I'll use the library as an example, that if now that, take the cleaning, the example you gave comes out of the library budget, has any compensation been made that we've taken it out of this and putting it now into these other places? Any adjustments to their budgets?
Absolutely. That was when we made that move. That's what was that was the start of it, and we've deducted it out of this one. This account used to be considerably more, but now that we've pulled those out, we've adjusted the budgets that the wages went into and have subtracted it out of this. So that's been incrementally done over a period of years. Library was probably the first, then the highway department after that. So. Yep.
Thank you, James. Any other questions or comments? I was just going to add that the reason that last year's appropriation is fairly similar is that it has happened over a period of time, and so it doesn't look like it changed much, but it did. Any other questions or comments? All right, those then in favor of raising through taxation $19,350 for physical plant expenses, please indicate. Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next account is the septage disposal, and the request is for $2,000, with all of that being raised by taxes. Do I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The septage disposal request is for $2,000, with that amount being raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the general assistance account. The request is for $20,000, with $15,000 of that being raised through taxation and $5,000 from revenues. Could I have a motion, please? And a second. Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the general assistance account is for $20,000, with $15,000 being raised by taxation and $5,000 from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The recreation budget is the next line. The request is for $25,455, with $19,455 being raised through taxation and $6,000 from revenues. Can I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes. James will address that.
Thank you. If you'll indulge me, I'll explain the budget too. 2 years ago, Kerry Cross was running our recreation department, part-time position, put on programs as we could get interest in them. We always had a pre-sign-up. A lot of programs that we had suggested didn't come through because we didn't get enough interest in actually running them. So 2 years ago, she resigned. So last year, without a recreation director, the selectmen decided to carry forward the budget only for the wages. That's why the last year's amount is as low as it is. And this year, we were able to hire David Walsh, and we've added back the programming part of the budget. Last year, we did cobble together some recreation stuff, but it was done through volunteers, baseball, basketball. Dave came in and started helping us around soccer season, so we had a soccer program. This year, we're already making some plans for all those to take place, but also are doing sign-ups for a summer soccer program. We're going to have a camp that's held here. So we're really encouraged. We think there's going to be some real improvements to recreation for our youth this year.
Any other questions? I have a question. What about us old people? We like to have a little recreation, too. Any other questions or comments? All right, the recreation request then is for $25,455, with $19,455 raised with taxation and $6,000 from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. One of the best-kept secrets in town, the Carver Memorial Library. The request is for $90,331, with that amount being raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Everybody knows where it is then. That's good. That's a good thing. All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the library is for $90,331, with that amount being raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next item is the planning board. The request is for $4,800, with $2,800 being raised by taxation and $2,000 coming from revenues. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes. Yeah.
What kind of revenues would that committee have?
I'm going to get my exercise, thank you. Their revenues are from applications for business applications and such. And you will see an increase in this because we are putting in for a small increase to their wages. They made a whole $100 stipend per year, and we felt that and it hasn't been adjusted since I don't even know when, and we're going to try to move them up to $300 a year. Not a lot for what they do, but a little appreciation. So.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question then. The item before you is the planning board. The request is for $4,800, with $2,800 coming from taxation and $2,000 from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The next item is the economic development. The request is for $600, with that amount being raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes. Mr. Taliander first, and then Janet.
I just wonder, why is it a paltry amount?
We don't have a recreation program, but I'm going to make sure
You're taking care of the old people. Yeah, all we do with this account is we pay for memberships to various organizations. We pay for putting brochures in the visitor center. This is just a carried forward, and I believe I don't have my book. Yeah, that's not changed from last year, so the fees haven't gone up. We have a part-time economic development person working for us by contract, and his wages are not in the book because he's paid from the tax increment financing package that we have. And we will be talking about that later in the meeting.
Don't let him off the hook too easy. Any other questions or comments on the economic development? All right, if not, I'll move the question. The request is for $600, with that amount being raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the code enforcement officer. The request is for $31,928, with $26,928 from taxation and $5,000 from revenues. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? The question was, is it still part-time? And the answer is yes. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The line for the code enforcement officer, the request is for $31,928, with $26,928 being raised by taxation and $5,000 from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The Board of Appeals. This is the one I always wonder if we can afford. The request is for $100 to be raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the Board of Appeals is for $100 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? And those opposed? The motion carries. The Community Health Officer, the request is for $969, with that amount being raised by taxation. Have a motion? Thank you, Linda. Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Janet?
Our community health officer, it's a requirement by state law that we have one, and the community health officer receives information from the state when there are any sort of epidemics, and then is responsible to notify people. He also responds to complaints, and this past year, I know that because I was involved in a couple of them, he responded to several complaints about infestations like lice and I think that was the main one. I think he responded to 2 or 3 of those. So it is an active position. The amount that we pay for that position is probably not enough for what he has to go out and deal with. But anytime anyone has a question or concern about health issues, we've even in the past dealt with complaints about rats. Not recently, thankfully. And he's responsible to actually do the investigation, report back to the state the findings, and meet with people. So, and if you ever have a question, it's Adrian Stone. He's our ambulance director as well, right next door.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Community Health Officer account request is for $969, with that amount being raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? Okay. The next account is the Mossman Park account. The request is for $3,000, with that amount being raised by taxation. Can I have a motion? Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. The Mossman Park appropriation request is for $3,000, with that amount being raised and appropriated from taxes. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The next line is the holiday special events account. The request is for $4,000, with that amount being raised through taxation. A motion? Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The holiday and special events account request is for $4,000 to be raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? Motion carries. The next line is holiday decorations, and the request is $300 to be raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? You're not going to ask when we're going to put wreaths in our Searsport? We're trying to get some wreaths moved up in the northern end of town, and Erin's the champion of that cause. So. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the item. The holiday decorations request is for $300 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? Motion carries. The next line is the historic preservation. The request is for $750, with that amount being raised through taxation. I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Jim.
Great question. The number that is proposed this year is down from last year because last year we had to print brochures for the museum in the streets. Having completed that, we've dropped that back down to roughly what it costs to do this through the year. And like the earlier question about economic development, it's mostly for some additional printing that has to be done, but belonging to organizations like the Maine Historic Preservation Commission and things like that.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the historic preservation line is for $750 to be raised with taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line in the budget is the comprehensive plan. The request is for $2,000 and all of that to be raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? And a second, please. Somebody seconded. Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the comprehensive plan work is for $2,000 with that amount being raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the video system. The request is for $28,867 with that entire amount being from the revenue, on the revenue side. I have a motion. Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Don.
Can you explain what is going to be done through this?
All right. The question is, what is the video system? What's going to be done?
Yeah, we're on TV today, and the reason we're on TV is because George Kerper's downstairs doing the diligent work to put us there. This is a revenue account. The monies that go to support this completely come from the users. Anyone that has cable in their house, unfortunately, it's not everybody in town because we can't reach everyone, but they pay a small surcharge on the bill. That's what this goes to. What we don't spend from this account is authorized by us, by the legislative body, to be put into a reserve account. So we actually have a reserve account, I believe, with about $20,000 in it. What that will do in the future is replace equipment. In the course of having this for the better part of, I think, 12 years, we've had to replace a lot of equipment downstairs because it wears out. And this account is where, if it happens during an operating year, it would come out of. And if not, it goes to reserve account, and we'll take it out of that. But it basically goes to run everything that is pertaining to video.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request for the video system for the year is to raise $0 from taxation and appropriate the $28,867 from revenue. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The next line is the capital and special projects, the road book and GIS. The request is for $4,000 with that amount to be raised through taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes.
How does this account tie into the plan to redo Main Street?
How does this account tie into the plan to redo Main Street?
I'm actually not sure that there's a great connection between them, but our GIS system has been very instrumental in identifying features like our hydrant system and our sewers and everything. There are overlays on it. And I would think that the Main Street will be taking advantage of the knowledge and information that we already put in. But this generally helps with identifying road issues that need to be repaired. We have a road maintenance system computer program that we enter in the conditions of the road each year, and it kind of gives us an idea of where we need to go. It's great for planning, and again, I think that probably the DOT borrowed some of the information that we've already gathered on our main street. So.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Capital and Special Projects line, Road Book, GIS, the request is for $4,000 with that amount to be raised and appropriated from taxes. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The ambulance reserve account, the request is for $10,000 with $0 coming from taxation and the $10,000 being appropriated from revenue. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The ambulance reserve request is for $10,000 with no money from taxation and the $10,000 being appropriated from, raised or appropriated from the revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the Public Works Equipment Reserve. The request is for $20,000 with that amount to be raised through taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The question is to raise $20,000 for the Public Works Equipment Reserve with that amount being raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the Road Maintenance Reserve. The appropriation request is for $275,000 with $175,000 being raised from taxation, $50,000 from revenue, and $50,000 from excise tax. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Dolores.
If we've got that amount of money, why can't we get prospects taken care of?
Okay.
That's been addressed for 2 or 3 years now, and it still is not right.
Okay, the question is what's going on with Prospect Street?
I can only answer what I've been told. Bob has that on the list to be done this year. There are some road cuts that are going to be made in that, some crossovers for people that are doing some development up on Prospect Street. But it's Bob's a highway foreman. His plan is to work on Prospect Street this year.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Road Maintenance Reserve Account request is for $275,000 with $175,000 being raised by taxes and $50,000 from revenue and $50,000 from excise tax being appropriated. Those, yes, you want to say something else? Should I let him?
Give me permission. I wanted to clarify, that's not all this year going to be put into roads. There's a debt service. Last year, the town approved borrowing some money to do some of the roads out in the backcountry, and we've accomplished most of that. And we now have a debt service. We'll be paying around $125,000 a year till we pay the note off. But we did improve 90% of our side roads. Not Prospect Street, but Bob does tell me that's on the list. We didn't spend any of our reserve account money last year, so that has actually added. So we will have in the neighborhood of $300,000, and we're hoping that Prospect Street's going to be one of our jobs. Thank you. No, we're actually going out to the bond bank. We put in our application, we're going to be with that debt for probably, well, it will be the next 10 years. It fluctuates a little bit because the bond repayment schedule goes down, but we're going to have that for a while. But the good thing, and the reason why the board decided to do that was the cost of pavement is at a 12-year low, and the cost of borrowing still remains at record lows. So it was the right time to get the most work done for the amount of money that we spent. And our cost benefit is these roads on the backside will last 30 or 40 years. So they'll way outlast the amount of the loan. So I will hopefully not be manager when we have to pay them again. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yes, Don? Do we know what other roads are going to be done besides Prospect?
I'm not completely sure. We have about 3 other roads that we needed to do overlays on so that we could extend their longevity. They weren't in such bad shape that we had to completely rebuild them. Bowen Road, Nickerson Road, and Partridge Road were definitely on that list. But we continue to do other maintenance as it comes along as best we can.
All right, any other questions on the road maintenance? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The request is for $275,000, with $175,000 being raised through taxation and $50,000 appropriated from revenue and $50,000 from excise tax. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next is the Fire Department Equipment Reserve. The request is for $30,000 to be raised through taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Fire Department Equipment Reserve request is for $30,000 to be raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the Public Safety Building Repair. This is a reserve account too, isn't it? Yeah, this also is a reserve account. The request is for $10,000 to be raised by taxation. I have a motion, thank you, and a second, thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Public Safety Building Repair Reserve Account, the request is for $10,000 to be raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the Police Cruiser Reserve. The request is for $8,000 with that amount to be raised through taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The Police Cruiser Reserve request is for $8,000 with that amount being raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the Wharf Repair Reserve Account. The request is for $2,500 with that amount being raised through taxation. Motion, thank you, and a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Mary. Is that enough? Is that enough?
Good question. Yeah, it actually will be. This year, our part-time economic development director, one of the first things he did upon coming to our service was apply for a grant, and we were awarded a grant from the state to replace the ramp and do some work with our floats. And we had a pretty severe storm, as everyone remembers, back in October, November. We're also in the federal program for getting a reimbursement. I have a meeting on Monday, and we'll be getting some money to do some additional work. We had 2 floats damaged in that storm, and a lot of the railing on that was knocked off. So I'll be getting some money from the federal government and the state to do that work. So we did pave it last year, so the parking lot's in really good shape. A couple years ago, we did the rebuild and we did some lighting, so we can get the floats done and the ramp repaired. The amount that's in this account is actually going to be used as matching money on the grant. By summer, because we already have the ramp, and hopefully by summer we will have the wharf condition will be better than it's been in, Wayne's right there, 15 years, so, or better. So, yeah, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The item is the wharf repair reserve. The request is for $2,500 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the sidewalk repair reserve. The request is for $1,000, with that amount being raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes, Karen. What's it for? Sidewalks.
That's the short answer. It's for repair, expansion, or increasing our sidewalk capacity. In fact, we haven't done anything with sidewalks for a number of years. One, because the cost of pavement has been so high. But this year, with the cost of pavement going down and having enough money in the account, our first project is up on Church Street. We started the groundwork last year. We cut some trees, and we're going to make it safer to walk on Church Street for people attending church or going to the museum. And that's been a project that Bruce Mills isn't here to confirm this, but he was talking about when he was selectman so many years ago. So I'm very proud that's a 3-way partnership between the church, the museum, and the town to finally get that project much better. And in fact, it'll add some increased capacity for handicap parking up there as well. So we're really excited about that. Not at all. This is our ongoing account to keep our sidewalks good for the pedestrians.
I also appreciate the fact that sidewalk plow is wonderful. Any other questions or comments? All right. The line item before you then is the sidewalk repair reserve. The request is for $1,000, with that to be raised through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next line is the property reevaluation reserve. The request is for $1,000, with that $1,000 being raised through taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right. Yes. Were you feeling lonely?
No question, but I do want to say we are underway in our property reval. I want to say, because our assessor's sitting in the back of the room looking at me. So you're going to see some changes to, you're going to all get letters explaining your values. And what a reval does, it levels the playing field so that my house up on Bowen Road is compared to another house similar to it, maybe in another neighborhood, but it should have the effect of adjustment, but also reducing our mill rate, because there will be some value that hasn't been reported to us that gets captured, and we will be back at, we should be 100%. She's shaking her head at me. We should be 100% valuation, so the mill rate should decrease. So expect that in early June, somewhere along that, you'll be getting some information about the value. And we're also putting this into our computer program so that when you get your tax bills, you're actually going to be able to see a lot more information about your property. It's just not going to be a bill, send us money. You're going to know why that bill exists. And again, it's an outside organization that we contracted with, and they, it's going to be a fair across-the-board evaluation of the town. So I just want to throw that out there.
Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The property reevaluation reserve, the requested amount is $1,000 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The library capital reserve account, the requested amount is $2,000, with that amount being raised by taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes. Kathy?
What does that cover? I mean, just a rough idea.
What does a reserve account?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the town owns a building, so it's any major maintenance that needs to be done. Back during the 100th anniversary of the building, we put in a new sidewalk because the old cement sidewalk was really in bad shape. So any major repairs like that comes out of that account.
I'm going to put in a plug, too. As part of that project, the library and the town sold memorial bricks, and there are still bricks available. There's still lots of space on the sides that could take some more memorial bricks. So keep that in mind if you want to honor somebody's birthday or a wedding, or unfortunately maybe they're passing. That's an opportunity to support the library and honor friends and neighbors. So. Any other questions or comments? Yes. The price, they're $75, and they'll be engraved with whatever you would like on them. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll move the question then. The library capital reserve request is for $2,000 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The next account is the cemetery equipment reserve. The request is for $500, with that amount being raised and appropriated through taxation. Motion, thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes. The question is, how are the toppled monuments being addressed?
Let me just get a little background for cleaning and straightening. We started a program 12 years ago of going from cemetery to cemetery, and at one point I could give it thumbs up and say we got it all done, because at one point everything was standing and everything had been cleaned. But every winter they come back down, and what we generally do is we get the Board of Selectmen to authorize from reserve an amount of money to go back and start all over again. I don't believe we had any work done last year, because the year before we had the job done, but I've been in the cemeteries, and the snow and the frost has done its share of damage. So we'll probably be making another request from the selectmen to authorize some more straightening and cleaning again.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll move the question then. The cemetery equipment reserve request is for $500 to be raised and appropriated through taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The next account is the building repair reserve. The requested amount is for $15,000, with that amount being raised through taxation. Do I have a motion? And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. The building reserve, repair reserve account, request is for $15,000 to be raised and appropriated from taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries. The Town Hall Computer Reserve, $500, the request is for $500 to be raised and appropriated from taxation. Could I have a motion? And a second, thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll move the question. The Town Hall Computer Reserve, the request is for $500 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. The Transfer Station Reserve, the request is for $500, with that amount being raised and appropriated through taxation. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. Transfer Station Reserve, the request is for $500 to be raised by taxation. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The Ambulance Equipment Reserve, the request is for $6,500, with that amount being appropriated from revenues. I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? I'll move the question. Ambulance Equipment Reserve, the request is for $6,500 to be appropriated from revenues. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. The next item is the 175th Anniversary Reserve Account. The request is for $1,500 to be raised through taxation. Can I have a motion? Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes. The question is that going to be enough money? How big a party are you planning?
Well, we certainly hope it will be. We have just shy of $3,000 in the account now. This money was going to hopefully be used like seed money to start the printing and promotional stuff. In the 125th anniversary and the 150th anniversary, the town minted coins. You've seen them at auctions and around. They did T-shirts. They did a lot of promotional things. This is to get that seed money to get that off the ground, and then those would be sold to go back in the account. But we do hope, and we do have a committee that's forming as we speak, and anyone interested in helping with getting that together, come to the town office, get an application, and we'll get you on that board, because there's a lot of work to do. In years past, when we've had the celebration, they've been weeks long, and we hope to duplicate that and maybe do better.
Any other questions or comments? All right, if not, I'll move the question. The request is for $1,500 to be raised through taxation for the 175th Anniversary Reserve Account. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Okay, Article 4. To see if the town will vote to authorize the municipal offices to spend an amount not to exceed 3/12 of the 2018 annual budget during the period from January 1, 2019 to the completion of the 2019 town meeting, except those costs associated with public works winter road maintenance may, if necessary, exceed this amount. Could I have a motion? Could I hear somebody say so moved? Thank you. And seconded? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the Article 4 to see if the town will vote to authorize the municipal offices to spend an amount not to exceed 3/12 of the 2018 annual budget during the period from January 1, 2019 to the completion of the 2019 town meeting, except those costs associated with the Public Works Winter Road Maintenance Program may, if necessary, exceed this amount. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 5, to see if the town will vote to authorize the tax collector to accept and pay no interest on prepaid taxes not yet due or assessed. Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll read the article. Article 5, see if the town will vote to authorize the tax collector to accept and pay no interest on prepaid taxes not yet due or assessed. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 6, to see if the town will vote to determine when the 2018 taxes shall be due and payable, the recommended due date being September 4th, 2018. And in the motion, I'd like to hear that date repeated, please. Somebody? It's been moved that we recommend to September 4th, 2018. Do I hear that seconded? All right, thank you. Questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to set the date of September 4th, 2018 as the date when 2018 taxes shall be due and payable. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries with the date of September 4th, 2018. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to set the interest rate to be paid by the town on abated taxes at 5% for the fiscal year 2018. The maximum state rate is 7%, and we are recommending the minimum rate allowable at 5%. I need to hear a percent mentioned in the... Dorothy?
So moved for 5%.
All right. Seconded? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right. The motion before you then is to set the rate to be paid by the town on abated taxes at 5% for the fiscal year 2018. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 8, to see if the town will vote to charge interest on the 2018 taxes remaining unpaid after a certain date, and if so, what rate of interest and what due date. I'll need to hear a verbal recommendation. The recommendation is for 5% annually or 0.417 monthly interest starting on October 9th, 2018. I hear,
So moved at 5% annual, 0.417% monthly, with a recommended date of October 9th, 2018.
all right. And a second. I heard it behind me. Questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to set the rate for that the town will charge interest on 2018 taxes remaining unpaid after October 9th, 2018 at 5% annually or 0.147 monthly. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries with 5% being the annual rate and the date being October 9th, 2018. Article 9, to see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to expend funds from any reserve accounts for the following purpose, any major, in my staple, I guess. Note that major is defined as any cost not included in the corresponding operating budget. The ambulance reserve for the purchase of a vehicle or major repairs, public works equipment for the purchase of a vehicle, equipment, or major repairs of existing vehicles, road maintenance, costs associated with rebuilding, resurfacing, and major repair of town roads and shoulders, fire department reserve for the purchase of vehicles or equipment or major repairs to existing vehicles or equipment, public safety building reserve, major repair, renovations, or upgrade to the public safety building in the North Fire Station, Police Cruiser Reserve for the purchase of vehicle or major repairs to existing vehicles. The Wastewater System Reserve for additions to or repair or replacement of the wastewater system, equipment, sewer lines, or anything appurtenant thereto. Dredging Reserve for the dredging of Searsport Harbor or harbor-related projects. The Transfer Station Reserve for the purchase or repair of disposal-related vehicles, equipment, or structures, costs associated with any reconfiguration of the transfer station site, or relocation to a different site if required, or any other costs associated with bringing the site into compliance with town, state, and federal regulations. The Wharf Repair Reserve, major repairs and replacement of the town wharf, floats, or portions thereof. Sidewalk repair, major rebuilding, extension, or resurfacing of town sidewalks. Property Reevaluation Reserve, costs associated with the reevaluation of real and personal property. Library Capital Reserve, major repairs and renovations of the Carver Memorial Library. Cemetery Equipment Reserve, purchase of capital equipment or major repairs to existing equipment. Building Repair Reserve, major repair or renovation of town buildings. Computer Capital Reserve, purchase or upgrade of town computer equipment, peripherals, and software necessary to the town operation. Economic Development Reserve for economic development projects and to print a business or visitor's guide as needed. The TIF Revenue Reserve, the tax increment financing reserve to be used on approved economic development projects in town. The Police Personnel Reserve for the purpose of depositing funds refunded to the town when a trained officer leaves Searsport to take a position with another department. These funds are only to be used for the purpose of training and equipping replacement officers as needed. The Ambulance Equipment Reserve for the purpose of depositing funds to buy specialized equipment for the ambulance department, and the 150th Celebration Reserve to support activities related to the celebration in 2020 of the 175th anniversary. Will somebody make a motion and repeat all that? All right. Thank you. And I'm not going to read it all again either. The motion before you is to accept Article 9 as written and read to you. Any questions or comments on any of those reserve accounts? Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't see who was speaking. Oh.
The book is correct.
Oh, the book is correct. Mine's wrong, and being the good teacher that I am, I read just what it said. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Earlier we talked about economic development. Is this what you're talking about was kind of hidden?
Next, 2 articles. 3.
No, it's,
In a couple articles.
it's not in this one. It's a little further on. Any other questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to approve to authorize the selectmen to expend the funds for any of these accounts for any of the following major purposes as printed. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. All right, Article 10, to see if the town will authorize the selectmen to dispose of surplus equipment or vehicles, crediting the respective department reserve with any proceeds. I have a motion and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. To see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to dispose of surplus equipment or vehicles, crediting the respective department reserve with any of the proceeds. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 11, to see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to dispose of town-owned personal property not otherwise addressed in Article 10, with a sale value of $3,000 or less, upon such terms and conditions as the selectmen shall deem advisable. Those in favor of that motion? Oh, so I'm sorry, I need a motion first. And a second. Thank you. Any questions or comments? Somewhere. Okay. The request is for an example of what that would cover.
I have a bunch of them at the town garage, a bunch of examples. We have an old backhoe that we've taken out of service. We've replaced it this year. A couple of vehicles that are not roadworthy, but they have to be gotten rid of. They still have some value. In years past, we had a compressor, and we've had various equipment that needs to go away. And we usually put them out to a closed bid. Sometimes we actually have a tag sale because we get rid of old printers and things like that. And this year we hope to clean a lot of stuff out. If you've been up by the garage on Prospect Street, you'll see we've got a load of stuff out back that's got to go. And I don't want any of it. And I know probably there are people that collect this kind of stuff, so we have to get rid of it. And you have to authorize us to do that. Otherwise, we'll keep it forever. Thank you.
Truth is, Bobby Joe won't let him have that stuff. All right, the question. Oh, I'm sorry, Dolores.
Does that include that old glass and the culverts? Yep. The old culverts and stuff, and it's not a mess.
Okay, the question was, does it include the old bus and culverts and stuff? And the answer is yes. Any other questions? All right, the motion before you then is to authorize the selectmen to dispose of town-owned personal property not otherwise addressed in Article 10 with a sale value of $3,000 or less upon such terms and conditions as the selectmen shall deem advisable. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? Motion carries. Article 12, to see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to contract for necessary services as appropriated under such terms and conditions as they deem advisable. I have a motion. Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, the question is what kind of services?
I'll give a couple of examples from this past year. We put out a number of RFPs, requests for proposals. One was for an economic development director, and we have him on board. Another was to do a downtown planning process, and without permission of the town to actually go out to bid these things out, we can't get that kind of work done. There are other things, if we put out bids for computers or whatever, this is the article that actually authorizes them to enter into such contract. Every year we contract for, or at least every year that I'm aware of, we've contracted for roadside ditching and roadside mowing. And again, this article is required for us to move that work forward. Generally, the money comes from either the operating accounts, like in Public Works, he has money set aside for roadside mowing, or from the reserve accounts. And when the board makes such a motion to do these contracts, they have to, for the record, identify which account it comes from.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I'll move Article 12 to authorize the selectmen to contract for necessary services as appropriate under such terms and conditions as they deem advisable. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 13, to see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to expend funds from the selectmen's contingency account to meet unbudgeted, necessary expenses, or to meet an unexpected need for additional money to fund an expenditure previously authorized. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And seconded? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. Article 13 authorizes the selectmen to expend funds from the selectmen's contingency account to meet unbudgeted necessary expenses or to meet an unexpected need for additional money to fund an expenditure previously authorized. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. Article 14, to see if the town of Searsport will appropriate up to $80,780 from the 2018 Emery's Clay, formerly PPSA-OV, tax revenue to fulfill the year 13 requirements of the town of Searsport's credit enhancement contract with Emery's Clay, formerly PPSA-OV, for tax increment financing to the following. 65% of the amount will be returned to Emery's Clay, formerly PPSA-OV, and 35% will be placed in the town of Searsport's TIF reserve account. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And seconded? Thank you. Questions or comments? Yes. I don't either.
And this is the place for David's question as well. 13 years ago, we entered into a credit enhancement agreement and started a tax increment financing program when the Brazilian clay company, PPSAOV, came to town. And the state allows towns to enter into these in order to advance their economic development programs. When we did this, we did not have a real solid plan for what we would do in the future. So the monies that were going into the TIF program were being saved until we reached a point where we had a clear vision of what we wanted to do. What this does is not only do we put money into a economic development account, that money that's being generated, the value of everything that they put into their business, it doesn't count against us for school assessment or state valuation. So basically, we shelter that money away from the state. So it has an added benefit of not increasing our taxes for someone coming to town like that. Now, I will say, here's where we're kind of up against it. We're in year 13. It's a 20-year credit enhancement agreement. We have to spend the money before the 20 years expires, or we'll be penalized and money will go to the state because we didn't fulfill our obligation. That's why the selectmen took the decision to move forward and get some help with economic development and hire someone. We have $343,063.09 in the account to be spent in the next 7 years. We, last year, along with paying some personnel and doing some advertising in various magazines and doing some printed material, we spent $48,279.52. But we added $31,024.76. So you see, we're minding the gap, but we really have to come up with some ideas. We have started a downtown planning process in hopes of starting a new TIF district to benefit the shops and businesses that are located downtown. Before the expiration, I'm sorry I'm getting confusing, but before the expiration of our current credit enhancement agreement, if we start a TIF downtown, we could shift some of that money into the downtown TIF, which would give businesses a chance to come to town, or existing businesses in town, to borrow money out of a revolving loan account. Maybe they want to do some equipment improvements, or they want to do a facade improvement, or whatever that program is designed to allow. So it's a complicated system once you get involved, but we're going to do everything to preserve that money and make it work harder for us, especially for the folks in the downtown. We have also extended the district so that we may be able to use some of this money for the downtown rebuild that's scheduled for 2019, once we have some hard and fast numbers for sidewalks and things like that. So this money is going to be working harder for us. Did I get it all, David?
My question regarding economic development, part-time position, it was, I think, the second year
First year. We're entering into the second year of having someone.
what is the suggestion? Where are we going? We continue to talk about economic development. Now we have somebody kind of part-time that
So the question is, where are we going with, I have to paraphrase because we're on TV. Where are we going with economic development? Well, that's kind of why we hired someone that had a lot of experience in the field to get us in a direction. One of the major things this year that the board had agreed to was this downtown planning process. We know the downtown roads are going to be rebuilt, but we have no vision of where we need to go. So we put out an RFP, and Wright Pierce Engineers, who they do a lot of municipal work, is working with us. They've already had one listening session, and they're going to do additional so that we can self-determine where we want to go. And then when they're done with their report, they're going to give us a deliverable that will tell us what might fit best downtown, what we need to market towards, what grant opportunities are available. This report is going to be pretty comprehensive, and it also lays the groundwork for us to start the process to start a TIF district. So I would probably pretty confidently say, if that was left to your town manager or your board of selectmen, we wouldn't be in this position. So aside from the grants that he's applied for and the money that's come in and the businesses that he's worked with, we have a jewelry shop coming to downtown, a gentleman. He's worked with them to make that a more pleasant experience to come to town, along with the planning board, the assessor's office, the code enforcement office. He's kind of acting as a liaison. He talks to just about everybody that's knocking on the door. And again, the planning process is going to identify how we can best move forward to getting the right kind of businesses. And everyone here knows we want to go find business. We just don't want to wait for the next big thing to come. We're actually being proactive. So I hope that does it. Any other questions about TIF or where we're at? Please.
James, can you talk about any other businesses that you're hopefully looking for in town?
I can talk in generalities. Somebody asked me recently, somebody made a comment recently, well, why aren't you looking for a fish farm? And we actually had that conversation, and we identified a piece of property, and we worked with a developer. And we potentially could have had it, but we didn't have the right combination of resources. We couldn't get out far enough in the bay to draw the water in safely so the fish farm could locate here. So those kinds of things are always happening. Right now, the concentration is going to be on what businesses best fit downtown and you know, what we can actually market to. And our goal is to really concentrate on that in this coming year. We hope to have a report by the end of summer. And of course, the downtown rebuild is going to add a whole new feel for downtown. We're really excited about that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, the article before you then is to see if the town of Searsport will appropriate up to $80,780 from the 2018 Emery's Clay tax revenue to fulfill the year 13 requirements for the town of Searsport credit enhancement contract, with 65% of the amount be returned to Emery's Clay and 35% to be placed in the town of Searsport's TIF reserve account. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? All right, the motion carries. Article 15, to see if the town will vote to accept the following sums to be paid in trust for cemeteries. The investment income is to be used toward the perpetual care cost of the cemetery lots designated to the following: to Travis and Barbara Ashe, the amount of $350 at Gordon Cemetery for lots 45, 7, and 8 in Range 2, and Johan Nami at $550 in the Village Cemetery for lot 339 in Range 5. Could I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I'll move the question to see if the town will vote to accept the sums printed for, to be paid in trust for the cemeteries to the investment to be used toward perpetual care. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. Article 16, to see if the town will approve transferring the proceeds from cemetery lot sales to the cemetery reserve account. The total transfer amount is $900. Could I have a motion? And second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question to authorize the town to approve the transfer of the proceeds from cemetery lot sales to the cemetery reserve account in the amount of $900. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? All right, the motion carries. Article 16. Now, that was Article 16. No, I'm not. That was 15.
You're on 17.
Oh. All right, I didn't make my little check mark. Okay, Article 17, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support the Searsport Historical Society for the continued restoration and maintenance of the Crary Carlin Coleman House. The 2017 appropriation was $2,500. The request this year was for $3,000. The Selectmen recommend $2,500, and the Budget Advisory Committee recommended $3,000. So I need an amount certain in the
Madam Chair?
motion. Yes.
I move that we accept the amount for the $3,000.
Do I hear that seconded? And seconded. Questions or comments?
A comment?
Yes,
Hi.
briefly.
Very briefly, the reason for the $3,000, we always come to you and let you know what it's for. This is to help do the doors on the barns. We cannot move them without a lot of help to do it, and we're getting older, and they're stuck. And what we need to do, we've already got the quotes and everything, to not replace the doors, but change the way they operate, and if it was $1,500 for that. The other $1,500 is we have a red squirrel problem. We've put in the, have a heart trap, and even by remote control for the video camera in Rex and Karen's house, they watch this little animal go in and out and all over the place, and it doesn't do a darn thing. We've gotten gone out 4 different people to get quotes to get rid of it. We've only got 1 quote back. It's $1,500 because they have to find the source where the little animal is coming in. We don't know how many are there. It's been quiet this winter. We don't know what's going to happen in the return for spring. And if we don't use it, we won't use it, the money.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to grant the Historical Society, to raise and appropriate for the Historical Society the amount of $3,000 for the coming year. Those in favor of that motion? And those opposed? The motion carries in the amount of $3,000. Article 18, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support the Waldo Community Action Partners. The 2017 appropriation was $13,081. The Selectmen recommend $12,335, and the Budget Advisory Committee recommended the request of $19,706. I need a motion with an amount stated.
I make a motion that we go with the $13,081.
Which was last year's appropriation.
That's $12,335. That's this year's.
Okay, you said $13,081.
I think I did.
That's why you confused me,
Yep.
which isn't difficult. I'm sorry, I can't hear who's speaking. Sandra?
May I make a second recommendation?
You can second the motion. I need a second on that motion first. All right, I hear it seconded. You have a question or a comment? Okay, I'm listening. Then you want to amend his motion to the amount of $19,706. Do I hear a second for that amendment? All right. Questions or comments on the amendment? Yes.
What's the difference? What are they trying to fund with the difference in money?
Michael is here. He is not a resident of Searsport. Do you wish to hear from him? Could I see a show of cards, please? I need 2/3. All right, we've got it. Go, Michael, you can go to the microphone, please.
Good morning. My name is Michael Hallenbeck. I'm a program director at Waldo Community Action Partners, which is essentially an agency that belongs to the residents of Waldo County. It's your agency. The amount that we are requesting from towns every year is never the same, and we use a formula to ask all municipalities in Waldo County for support. We do this because we need unrestricted funds to do things that we can't do with structured programs that we receive funds from. One example of that in Searsport last year was we needed to rebuild the roof of the Head Start Center, and we had to spend about $50,000, I believe, on doing that, and we needed unrestricted funds, non-traditional programs, state and federal fund, for that. Another reason we do it is to be able to match funds from a state and federal program. Most of them need matching funds to provide us with programs that help the residents. The way we do it is we ask every town for 2.5% of the value of services that we provided into that municipality in the previous year. And that's why it fluctuates. We ask all 26 towns in Waldo County, and all of them contribute in some way or the other. We're extremely grateful for the strong ongoing support of the town of Searsport and for the strong partnership we've had with Searsport for many years. To give you an idea of the fluctuation that you're seeing this year, the value of services the previous year provided to Searsport residents was $523,234. That resulted in a request of $13,081 that you heard before. So last year, in 2017, the value of services was $788,230. So more people in Searsport requested support program, participated in programs of one kind or the other, and therefore the request that we're doing based on the previous year funds goes up. We appreciate any support we can get. There's never enough money to go around. There's more need than there is money. And the more than 1,000 people that we helped last year in Searsport, we can always do more of. So it always fluctuates back and forth, sometimes a little, sometimes much. One of the big factors last year, the previous year there were 24 children in our Head Start program here in Searsport. Last year that was 41. So the cost simply goes up. The amount of support that we receive from each municipality has absolutely no bearing on us providing support in the following year. We're completely blind. It's not a conversation we have at the agency level. So I hope that answered a little bit of the questions.
Right. Does anyone have a specific question before Mike sits down? All right, Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the motion before you then is to amend Article 18 to the requested amount of $19,706. We'll vote first on the amendment, and if the amendment passes, then we'll vote on the article as amended. So we're voting first on the amendment to raise and appropriate $19,706 for Waldo County Community Action. Those in favor of that motion? All right, thank you. Those opposed? All right, the motion carries. All right, we will vote now on the amended article to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to support the Waldo County Community Action, and the amended amount is $19,706. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries as amended. Article 19, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support New Hope for Women. The appropriation last year was $1,325. The selectmen, that was the request again this year. The selectmen and the Budget Advisory Committee both recommend that amount. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? I mean, nobody's going to say there's no hope for women. I'm disappointed. All right, the motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the requested amount of $1,325 for Article 19. Those in favor of that motion? And those opposed? The motion carries in the amount of $1,325. Article 20, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support the sexual assault support services. Their appropriation last year was $1,000. Their request this year is $1,000. Both the selectmen and the BAC recommend that amount. I have a motion. And a second? Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the recommended and requested amount of $1,000 for the sexual assault support services. Those in favor of that motion? And those opposed? The motion carries. Article 21, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support the Waldo County YMCA. The appropriation last year was $1,500. Their request this year is $1,500, and both Selectmen and Budget Advisory recommend that amount. Could I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, the sum that the motion is to raise and appropriate $1,500 for Waldo County YMCA. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 22, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the recommended amount to help support the Life Flight Foundation. This was a new request this year for a service that is really moving on and helping in this area. The request was for $655. The Selectmen and Budget Advisory Committee both recommend that amount. Could I have a motion?
Motion for $655.
Thank you, and a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, those in favor then of raising and appropriating the requested amount of $655 for the Life Flight Foundation, please indicate. Thank you. Those opposed? I did note last night on the news, and perhaps many of you saw it as well, that they have just received another award for the service that they provide, and they're also helping to train similar flight services from Australia. They've come here to look at how this service is doing things. I thought that was quite a good recommendation. Article 23, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support Spectrum Generation. Their appropriation last year was $800. They have requested that amount this year, and the Selectmen and Budget Advisory both recommend that amount. Could I have a motion?
I recommend that we give
And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the requested amount of $800 for the senior spectrum, spectrum generation. Those in favor of that motion? And those opposed? All right, the motion carries. Article 24, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support the hospice volunteers of Waldo County. Their appropriation last year was $1,500. Their request this year is $1,500, and both Selectmen and BAC recommend that amount. Could I have a motion? And a second? Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the requested amount of $1,500 for hospice volunteers of Waldo County. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 25, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support the Searsport Beautification Committee. Their appropriation last year was $500. The request this year is for $500, and that amount is recommended by both Selectmen and BAC. I have a motion? And a second? And you're moving the $500. Questions or comments? All right, those in favor then of raising and appropriating the amount of $500 as requested for the Searsport Beautification Committee, please indicate. Thank you. And those opposed? The motion carries. Article 26, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support the Swan Lake Association. Their appropriation last year was for $750. Their request this year is for $1,000. Both the Selectmen and the Budget Advisory recommended the $750. I have a motion and I need an amount. All right, and do I hear that seconded? All right, thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we raise and appropriate the amount of $750 for the Swan Lake Association. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the amount of $750 for the Swan Lake Association for the coming year. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries for $750. Article 27, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support Maine Youth Alliance, New Strategies for Youth. They've changed the name 2 or 3 times, formerly the Game Loft. Their appropriation last year was $1,000. They requested that amount again this year. The Selectmen and the BAC both recommend the amount of $500. What do you wish to do? All right, and seconded, thank you. So the motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the amount of $500 for the Maine Youth Alliance New Strategies for Youth Game Loft. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? Motion carries for $500. Article 28, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support Friends of Sears Island. Their appropriation last year was $1,000. This year they requested $2,000. And the Selectmen and the BAC both recommend that amount. What do you wish to do? All right, and seconded. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question. The motion is to raise and appropriate $2,000 for the Friends of Sears Island for the coming year. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 29, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support Habitat for Humanity. The 2017 appropriation was $500. The request this year was for $1,000. Selectmen recommended $500. The Budget Advisory Committee recommended $1,000. I need a motion.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I move for it to accept the $1,000.
Do I hear that seconded? All right, the motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the requested amount of $1,000 for Habitat for Humanity.
May I?
Questions or comments?
Yes,
Briefly?
very briefly. Last year, the previous year in the fall, we had a situation where a family's home here, one of the trailers burned down. And when they went out to solicit families from all over Waldo County, the young lady that happened to have the problem here in Searsport was the one that was selected as to be the recipient for the Habitat for Humanity new home. So the house was built here in Searsport at her request. She had a choice between Monroe, Belfast, and Searsport. The land now, we have 2 families here in Searsport. That land for 3 families that could be there potentially was given to Habitat for Humanity at a town vote and given by the town. It'd been off the tax rolls for 40 years, over 40 years. So now we have 2 taxpayer families, and we have, this new one is coming up right now. We're going to be building a new home this year. Whoever gets selected has their choice, again, where they want to build.
All right, thank you.
And thank you again for Chief LaHaye and the Belfast Police Department. We did have some problems when the appliances were installed in the house that night. They were stolen, and they put due diligence, and all I can say is thank you very much, Chief LaHaye, for being in there.
Any questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to raise and appropriate the requested amount of $1,000 for the Habitat for Humanity. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries in the amount of $1,000. Article 30, just see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support Triad. This is another new account aimed at helping senior citizens. Their request was for $1,000. The Selectmen and the Budget Advisory Committee both recommended $500. Could I have a motion? I'll move $500. All right, $500. Do I hear that seconded? All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? Yes. Sandra, do you work on that? Yes. Please.
Mr. LaHaye is also on the committee.
Well, Mr. LaHaye, you can go down there and help her. Where it is a new account, I think it's a valid question. And
Triad is an organization made up of police officers, business people, and just from the public. They try to keep seniors home in their home safe. And there is a newsletter that goes out to 2,000 families in Waldo County. It alerts them to all the recent scams and different activities that are out there to help the public.
Triad supports the phone-in for people who live alone, too, doesn't it?
It does, and several years ago, I have a sore throat here. Several years ago, there was a lady that called in to make her morning call, and they didn't hear from her the next day. So they made 2 attempts to call her by phone, and she didn't answer. So then the sheriff's department is sent out to do a check on them, and she had fallen, and she was very cold, and she couldn't get up. So she did go to the hospital, and she was not able to go back to her home by herself. But that is a program that's been, very helpful to folks.
Any specific questions for Sandra? All right, thank you, Sandra. All right, the motion before you then, Article 30, is to raise and appropriate the amount of $500 to support Triad for this year. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries in the amount of $500. Article 31, to see what sum the voters will raise and appropriate up to the requested amount to help support Broadreach Community Services. There was no recommendation because Broadreach did not make a presentation to the Budget Advisory Committee. but did go out, as is anyone's right, and gathered enough signatures of town residents to have this put on the ballot. So there is no recommendation. Last year, the appropriation was $1,500, and they're requesting that amount again. Could I have a motion? All right, it's been moved to raise and appropriate $500 for Broad Reach Community Services. Do I see that seconded? All right, and seconded. Questions or comments? Yes.
I'd like to amend that motion to go for the request of $1,500. It will not here in our community.
Do I hear that seconded? Seconded. All right, the vote before you then is to amend the motion to the original amount of $1,500. Any questions or comments? Yes, Jim?
Could someone explain what they do and how
It's a child development agency in Belfast. Just before you get to Mullins, it's a big white house that sits up there, and they provide educational services for preschool children.
But they also deal with child abuse.
Yes, they do deal with that when they need to. Diane?
They deal quite extensively with child abuse and any other needs that families have. They're very committed to the community, and they've done a lot of help here in Searsport.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Chief, I'm sorry.
It's an all-encompassing program, and there are a number of families that utilize the service from Searsport.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to amend the article that was moved at $500, to amend it to the $1,500. Those in favor of that amendment? All right, thank you. Those opposed? All right, so the article is now amended to the requested amount of $1,500. Those in favor of that article as amended? Thank you. Those opposed? All right, the article passes in the amended amount of $1,500. Article 32, to see if the town will authorize the selectmen to appropriate up to $50,000 from surplus. I'm sorry? Yes. Yes, we just did. Amendment, and then we voted on the amount. Thank you, though, because... Okay, Article 32, to see if the town will authorize the Board of Selectmen to appropriate up to $50,000 from surplus to fund items within the 2018 municipal budget that would otherwise be raised by taxes. The Selectmen recommend 0 from surplus, and the Budget Advisory Committee also recommends taking $0 from surplus this year. Could I have a motion? And do I hear that seconded? All right, any questions or comments? All right, an explanation of what that surplus account is about.
Surplus money is not cash in the safe downstairs. It's mostly money that's owed to the town from people that didn't pay their taxes and various other things. And basically, we just passed an article that said that we can spend 3/12 of this year's budget from January 1 to the town meeting next year. This money, as it trickles in, and monies that are left over from the budget that weren't spent, that's what basically makes up surplus. The least amount to operate has to get us covering our schools for 3 months, plus payroll and such. So for many years now, we've been running with a very minimum amount of surplus, somewhere in the neighborhood of $800,000. Each year, we give the taxpayers the option of using some of that money to offset taxes. This year, our surplus, because we had an increased amount of revenues this year, is $1,124,901. The reason why this is coming up as a recommendation of 0 is the town selectmen have taken a vote to move us to a new fiscal year. Instead of a calendar year, 2 years from now, we will be in a fiscal year that matches the school. That helps our cash flow immensely. And I'll tell you, for the past 10 years or so, we have not had enough money to get to March. I have had to go out each year and get a tax anticipation note as early as the beginning of February to keep our operations running because we just didn't have enough surplus in the bank. This year, for the first time, we have not accepted or not gone out for our tax anticipation note. It's actually being bidded out right now. So we'll make it through March with this amount. So we're kind of anticipating trying to keep that surplus up a little bit, because when we do make the transition to a fiscal year that matches the school, we will run a town for a town budget of 18 months instead of 1 year. So there's going to be a need to have a little bit extra surplus. Since we had additional revenues this year, this was the good year without taxing the public to actually keep that money in that account. And that's why the recommendation is 0. But the board always wants to give an option, and we felt 50,000 would be the option that would be appropriate for this year. Anyone else before?
Okay, the motion before you then in Article 32 is to recommend that $0 be taken from surplus this year. Those in favor of that motion? And those opposed? Thank you. The motion carries for $0 from surplus. Article 33, to see if the town of Searsport will vote to repeal the registration and licensing of non-municipal users of the PERC facility in Orrington, Maine for the town of Searsport due to changes made to contracts with Penobscot Energy Recovery that eliminate the need for it. Could I have a motion? And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, the motion before you then is to see if the town of Searsport will vote to repeal the registration and licensing of non-municipal users of the PERC facility in Orrington, Maine for the town of Searsport due to changes made to contracts with Penobscot Energy Recovery that eliminate the need for it. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 34, to see if the town will amend the land use ordinance for the town of Searsport. The changes are listed there in the ballot. They've been available to people for quite a while. I'm not going to read down through all of that. Could I have a motion? Yes. All right, it's been moved that we amend the land use ordinance as printed. Do I hear that seconded? Thank you. Any questions or comments on anything that you see there? Yes, Diane. I don't have the whole amendment here.
Yeah, and I believe this is language that's consistent with state building recommendations for those structures. I will admit I didn't attend any of the public hearings on this, and other than Bruce, who's on the board, I don't think anyone else in the room did either. Yeah, well, and what I will say about the changes is we have to either accept them as a package or deny them. So what we'll do is, I know George is downstairs, and of course Bruce is in the room with us. George is up here. If there's a problem with that, we'll have to address it in the next year. We can't change that. We kind of have to either accept it like it is, fix it later, or deny the whole thing. And there's a lot of other stuff there that's good. We could do a special town meeting for that purpose only if it's wrong, and if this legislative body would allow us to do that. And that would be my question of the legislative body. Okay. It's the next article.
Oh. Oh. Okay. That's actually in the next article, but we'll go ahead and, no, that's all right. We'll go ahead and answer your question while we've got George here, and then we'll be set when we get there.
I don't have any expertise on this, I just want to make sure something
No, oh, okay. It's in the subdivision ordinance, not in the land use ordinance, so. Okay, any other questions? Yes.
Pages 52, 53, 56 regarding historic district, examining landmarks and historic sites to be determined. Are we voting on how that will be determined, or are we voting to allow the selectmen to determine the specifics on that site? Near the bottom of the page.
Oh, I see it. Okay, I didn't see the pages. So the question is, the very last part of the article we're working on now, page 52, 53, and 56, definitions in historic district, historic integrity, historic landmarks, historic sites, and individual historic properties, definitions needed. The question is, what does that mean, George?
I don't know whether you have a copy of the ordinance? Okay. Well, hold on.
And there are still some of those available up back if you'd like one to take on your way out. Any other questions or comments on Article 34? Those printed amendments to the land use ordinance. All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the amendments for the land use ordinance for the town of Searsport, the changes as follows, and I did not read them all, but they're there. Those in favor of that motion to make those amendments? And those opposed? The motion carries. Now, the question that Diane had is actually included in Article 35, which is to see if the sum will vote to amend the subdivision ordinance for the town of Searsport with those changes as listed. And Diane, do you want to make a motion on that article?
No, the answer that I got is sufficient to know that needs something to be done.
Okay, so you're willing to move that article as stated? And seconded? Thank you. And now he'll answer the question.
Yeah, very quickly, the change isn't to all of the gravel that goes in, it's just the amount of gravel that goes into the base versus the subgrade. There's different levels of gravel, so the standard for construction now has been changed, and it makes sense that you have so much base, then so much fine gravel, then paving, then top. And so this is consistent with current road construction standards as recommended by the state. And so it really didn't change, it just changed the sub-base versus the fine gravel that goes on top of it. So it's good catch. Yeah, and before the sidewalk requirement was less, so it just increased that, but it changed the consistency of what's in the base of a road. So it was a very good catch. But it is accurate.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to see if the town will vote to amend the subdivision ordinance with the changes as printed there. Any other questions or comments? And again, there are copies up back of these things if you don't have one. Those in favor then of amending the subdivision ordinance with those changes, please indicate. Thank you. And those opposed? All right, the changes are approved. Article 36, to see if the town will amend the site plan review ordinance for the town of Searsport with the change as follows, and it's a one-word wording of a 2-year use change to coincide with the land use ordinance. Could I have a motion? Thank you. And a second? Thank you. Any question or comment on that section? Those in favor then of Article 36, amending the site plan ordinance? Thank you. And those opposed? Okay, that motion is, those changes are approved. Article 37, to see if the town will vote to amend the shellfish ordinance for the town of Searsport with the changes as printed there. Could I have a motion? So moved. And a second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'll move the question to see if the town, excuse me. I'm sorry, did somebody have a question? All right, Dolores, what is it? Steve, can you answer that? Who keeps track of how many peck of clams? Oh, I didn't know you counted clams.
I might as well. Believe it or not, we do encounter people time and time again. Bob has indicated that the members talk to each other about who's digging on each day, and it has come to our attention that there are people that go down there just about every day and do a peck of clams. So they're depleting our resource, and we wanted something in the ordinance to start to tighten it up. And there might be some documentation in the future of that, but certainly if Steve were down there one day and saw someone, and the next day saw someone, he'd be the person that would do the third day of getting a peck, the person would be dumping him back. So it's really going to be individualized, but right now I can pretty definitively say Bob catches you if you're down there, and he will know.
Any other questions or comments? All right, the motion before you then is to amend the shellfish ordinance for the town of Searsport with those changes. Those in favor of that motion? Thank you. And those opposed? All right, the amendments are approved. Before I do the very last article, I'm just going to remind again that the chowder has arrived, and they're more than happy to have you take some home with you and take a few cookies and bars and things to go with it, or stay here and chat with your neighbors and eat here if you prefer to. So. And Buddy Hall is still standing right there. I didn't notice him. Thank you, Buddy. I'll take the liberty of saying one more thing. My husband and I are overwhelmed to have the town book dedicated to us. We love this town. And one of the reasons we love this town is because people like Buddy have a business here and work here and do a lot to support the town. And we feel as if that honor has to be shared very thinly over a lot of people, so, but we do appreciate the dedication. Thank you. Aaron wants to say something? Oh. We have one more recognition.
Selectman here, Aaron Fefke, decided not to run for election. He served his town for 12 years, I think 9 years, Chair. And I think he deserves a round of applause and a thank you from the town.
I'm the only one here probably holding us up to get chowder and go home, so I'm not going to say anything other than thank you very much.
All right, we have one last article, Article 38, to see if the town will vote to accept the following street names as changes or as additions to the town of Searsport name list. A private lane off the Loop Road to be called Afternoon Drive, and the private lane connecting Serenity Lane to Sandy Ridge Lane in Ryan's Pass subdivision to be named Our Way. Could I have a motion? And a second? Second. Thank you. Questions or comments? All right, then you are voting to accept the street names and changes as printed. Those in favor of that? Those opposed? Do you want to make a speech, Jim? No, all right. If you do, Karen will get you, so. All right, thank you very much. I think, again, we've had a very successful meeting, and I'll move to adjourn.